thank you to all of you for coming along tonight. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you for coming to support the launch of Dark Days. Many thanks to Simon and his crew. Thank you, Father, for working so hard so that we just turned up and put a few things on the walls and there was food and drink, and it's really, really nice. Really nice. And many thanks to all of you who've supported my writing over the last few years by reading my books, purchasing my books, and saying nice things about them. And I really wanted to particularly say thank you to Mal, who puts up with an awful lot of stuff with my writing endeavours. He's had to learn to link an iPad and a square reader. He's had to learn how to read a digital book. Yep, and if you know Mal, you know he's not really a digital guy. But he puts up with all my endeavours and supports me through all of it. Also, this is Brianna over here. Sorry, Brianna, I'm pointing at you. Brianna is our daughter. She reads all my work in its very, very roughest form. Okay? And every writer needs an exceptionally honest critic. And fortunately, she is an exceptionally honest critic. And she has, on occasion, had to say things like, "Mum, that seriously sucks." Or "You're too bogged down in your character's head, I believe, went with Dark Days." Yeah. But an honest critic is the best thing that you can have. And somebody who doesn't actually pussyfoot around and hesitate because they think they might hurt your feelings. We actually do need to hear the harsh things. Otherwise, our own writing gets the better of us. Thank you to Andrew Harvey. He runs Hague Publishing, who published my books in Western Australia, and he's been publishing them right since the very beginning one, Frontier Incursion. When he sent me my acceptance letter, he said lots of very nice things about it, but then there was this list of 9 things that needed fixing. And one of them has a phrase that I've never forgotten, which says something like Star Wars, but not in a good way. Also many thanks to Jade from Steam Power Studios. She does the cover art. So Jade gets a quick sketch of the book from myself and from Andrew, and then some stuff that we think we might like on the cover. And then she comes up with it. So when she came up with the cover for Amethyst Pledge, it wasn't actually what we'd all thought, but we just loved it. It was like a graphic art concept rather than the more realistic type of concept that we liked. And you'll note that the theme on the books, so cover artists are really clever. They do things I don't think of, like continue the theme through the covers. So, you know, the words are all in the same font, they're all in the same colour. And of course we have the glowing amethyst motif. Also, in 2020 we launched Amethyst Pledge, which was the first book in this particular series. And we planned to launch just like this. But that was in April 2020. Okay? We all know what happened in April 2020. So Mel live streamed it from our lounge room. Brianna fielded the online questions in Townsville because I couldn't field them while I was talking to the live stream, which was really weird. And then the cat came and helped. And so the most common question I've had about this launch is, will the cat be here? No, the cat is not here, but thank you, Ryan. There is a picture of the cat assisting. So she's here in spirit, even though she probably would have enjoyed being here because she's quite social. And her name is Boots. As you know, some of you will know, my first series was about glow-in-the-dark cats, aliens, and a dangerous planet out to kill the unwary, and it was science fiction. Tonight's launch is officially about Dark Days, but it's sort of about Amethyst Pledge as well, because I always felt that the poor thing had to languish in a live stream launch. But in the Chronicles of Avatar, I moved into a fantasy world, or fantasy setting rather than science fiction. And I wrote only from one character's perspective, which for me is a new thing. If you've read the Frontier books, you'll know I'm in lots of people's heads, all over the place, at various times. So this time, we're only in one person's head. And so Khazari is a young woman who pledges her life to a religious order, the lady. She thinks that she's going to join the judiciary, maybe be a farmer. Instead, she wakes up and she's a hunter, and she has to fight the evil Gorgons who want her home country of Albertar to fall under their sway. So she's got a lot to learn, and all kinds of stuff happens. By Dark Days, she's struggling to come to grips with what happened at the end of Amethyst's Pledge. And as the Gorgon threat to Albertar rises and danger lurks, seemingly around every corner, she has to actually come to terms with what is happening and what has happened. I'm going to introduce Cecilia Connell. Cecil, as some of us know her, is a friend of mine. And on occasion, Cecil and I have talked about books for a little while.
A little while.
The last occasion ended just before midnight, I believe. So sometimes we do share a few good book things. And I asked her if she'd be a part of tonight's launch because she did quite like Amethyst's Pledge, which is really, really good.
It's really good. That's an understatement. It's really good.
So it's been really, really nice to chat about the stories with her, and she's read Dark Days, so she's already read Dark Days, so she knows what happens. So thank you so much for being a part of tonight. And to keep things rolling along, we're going to actually spend a little bit of time chatting about the stuff we like in terms of books, not a long time, and about a little bit of the story contained in Dark Days. You can ask questions if you would like at any point, and we will both do a short reading each from Dark Days, and they're two quite different readings. So, as you know, I have mentioned that we quite like books.
We do, indeed,
Yes.
Well, Leonie,
Yes.
you have mentioned this in your speech, but your first series, Frontier,
Yep.
science fiction.
Yep.
In the Albertar Chronicles, you're moving into fantasy. What is it about these genres, fantasy, science fiction, that appeals to you as a writer?
I like the escapism. So you can go somewhere that's not the real world. Sure, stuff that happens in the real world happens there, but you can go somewhere that is not the real world and actually take a break from reality, which, you know, maybe that's healthy, maybe it's not, but I think it's really healthy.
I think at the moment that's very healthy.
I think at the moment it's probably really, really healthy, particularly on the eve of the election. I'm happy to take a break from reality tonight. and you can do what you want. You can make stuff up, which I do a lot, and you can have a lot of fun. What do you like?
Well, I have to agree with all of that. Stepping away from reality and getting into a book like Dark Days is just, it refreshes the mind, and it's just completely different. So Leonie, speaking of which, how did this series come about? Tell me about the concept that flourished.
Over here you can see Deb and Simone. So we are part of Brook and Beyond Writers Group, and we write 500 words on a prompt. One day there was a prompt that was purple. Okay. And I wrote this 500 words on the prompt purple about this girl who woke up and discovered she was in a religious order, and she was going to have an amethyst around her neck and become a hunter. And then I looked at it and went, I think I'll write a book. And I did, during The Sound of Music.
Right, I didn't know that.
So while you were being Maria, I was writing about Gorgons, and then I tried the book out on some of the cast.
So everyone's been learning their scripts.
I was corrupting some of them and their parents with fantasy.
Well, there you go. And I had to ask, did those 500 words make their way into Amethyst's Pledge?
They did. Yeah, almost exactly as I wrote them. I was actually really happy with those 500 words. So they're in there almost exactly as I wrote them.
And it's spurred a trilogy.
Yes. So at the moment it's 190,000 words later, and whatever it is that I've already written for the next one, which is about 60,000, I think.
Well, I think we need to thank the Russell writers.
Beyond Writers. I can't even remember which one of us picked purple, but Deb was reminding me tonight that you wrote a poem, and we think Simone wrote something possibly to do with glam rock, and my mind says maybe it was Ziggy Stardust.
Would have had glam rock.
Yeah. You know Simone, you know she likes glam rock. So So you've read both books.
I have. So I read Amethyst Pledge when it came out in 2020. And then when I got myself a copy of Dark Days, I went back and read Amethyst Pledge leading into Dark Days. So I've read them back to back.
Right. What did you find? What happened? What struck you?
Oh, it was Dark Days was obviously just it was a seamless continuation of Amethyst Pledge, which I loved. Amethyst Pledge really is establishing the series. There's this dichotomy between good and evil, and there's a lot of action, particularly towards the end, the last scene which you alluded to earlier. But Dark Days is much more nuanced, I would say, in terms of Khazari, the main character, realises that it's, you know, good and evil is not so black and white. There's politics, there's choice, there's context, and it really delves into her mind. As Bree pointed out, it's not as straightforward, and it just becomes more complicated and so many more layers in terms of the story development and characters as well.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I did actually at one point get really stuck inside my character's head, and you'll be glad to know that I actually took 25,000 words or so out. Okay, fortunately that's why you have an editor, because they go, Leonie, too wordy, too stuck in your character's head. That's why you have a daughter. Because you do sometimes have to take stuff out. Yeah. What did you think about The Land of Albertar? How did you find it?
I think sometimes I love books of all genres. I've got quite an eclectic taste when it comes to genres, but I think particularly with sci-fi and fantasy, I find myself having to very deliberately think about the landscape, plan out what I think is happening in my head. But with both of these books, it's been seamless. It's like a movie playing in my head. And what I did have to say, I love Leonie. There are a few unique Australian bits and pieces in the landscape in the world of Albertar. I have to ask, as an Australian writer in this genre, how important for you? I mean, was that something quite deliberate, putting those hints? Because I don't know how if there are many Australian sci-fi writers, or I certainly think America when I think.
In those sense, yeah. Look, there are a lot. Australia has a really healthy science fiction and fantasy writing community, but fantasy is typically set in a European context. That's the classical fantasy with your elves and your wolves and your all these bits and pieces. Narnia, absolutely. So, yes, I deliberately put the Australianisms in there. And I don't know if you noticed, and we haven't actually talked about it, but Albertar is in the Southern Hemisphere.
Where do we go?
Yes. Yes. So when they go south, it gets colder. When they go north, it gets hotter. Generally speaking, unless you're on a very high plateau, which you may find in the next one, which you have. But I have. Yeah. So and because Australian representation, I think, is really, really important. Because there's more to the world than Europe, there's more to the world than the US. And as stuff has changed particularly over the last 10 years, particularly in science fiction and fantasy, different cultures are now being represented on a much more regular basis. And of course we have our own culture, and it's supremely important that some of it finds its way into literature that people will read everywhere. So, yeah, so there are wallabies, for example.
And there's a lorikeet.
Yes, there's lorikeet.
Touch
Touch of eucalyptus in there, and I have invented something on the Northern Border, which is based on a very large Tasmanian devil. So, yes, hopefully. Yes.
And I think, sorry, I was about to say, as you were saying, in terms of the character of Khazari, she has a lot of heart.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about her and her development, I guess, into the next novel.
Yeah, look, I didn't want Khazari to be a stereotypical fantasy or science fiction character. There's so many of them are blonde, blue-eyed and gorgeous. So she's not, she's short. She's got olivey skin, she's got tight curly hair. She's generally a bit stocky. And she comes from a really small town, and like a super small town, so she's actually really naive in the first book.
And that's what comes across in Dark Days. I found that I was reading it through her eyes, and then when she's discovering things about the world, sort of taking that,
Yes. Yeah, so in Dark Days she visits larger towns and she gets to visit a city for the first time in her life. And she realises how small her view of the real world actually is. And for her that's actually really important because that's when she starts to realise that not everybody thinks the same things and not everybody thinks the same way. And because when you grow up in a small community, sometimes you can be very secure in it and you understand how that community works. Yeah. And you tend not to want to venture too far from those laws. Yeah. So I want to ask you about the last scene.
oh my goodness, Leonie. When you get to the last scene of this book, I had to just put it down and go for a walk.
Yes.
Yeah, it had an impact. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but the last two scenes actually, they pack a punch. I won't lie, they absolutely pack a punch.
That is joy to my heart.
Well, not so much joy when I read it to begin with, but I don't give anything away, but yeah. Something happens at the end of this book. It's watch out.
Strangely enough, something does happen at the end of the book. Yes. And look, we authors like something to happen at the end of the book, but we do like to get a visceral response. So when I say it's joy to my heart, even though if your visceral response is like, that's fine. It doesn't matter what the visceral response is. If we can elicit a visceral response, we're really happy. Because, when you write something that you want to make an impact, you want it to actually make an impact.
Needless to say, I am very anxious for you to finish writing the next book.
We may have had a chat a couple of days ago. Can I ask you this thing? Sometimes I said, I can't tell you that. But we did chat
Get
about
writing.
writing. Whoops, crashed. There goes the manifest. Dug up by our own hands off Wiley Station about 20-something years ago. Are there any questions that anybody wants to ask about that? Yes, Helena.
You mentioned that you've taken 25,000 words of a character development out. Is that available for the unabridged version for any of your fans? Not that I've read any of the books, but I'm just expecting to want to know.
It was just rambling, really.
You may not. Some of the fans may not want the unabridged version because there was a lot of rambling, wasn't there?
Yeah, some things it was just going over something again, and it just rambled on when it didn't need to. It was dragging on.
See, honest feedback.
Yeah. So is that something you would consider developing then? So, if anybody did reach out to you, it's like, well, here's the inner workings of this character.
Well, interestingly, my publisher asked if I would write an article which he hopes to submit to a literary journal on how I took all the stuff out. Because look, it's one of the first things you learn as a writer is that you will be asked to take stuff out. Sometimes you have to argue and say, no, we need that bit. But most of the time it's actually really valid from an editor because they know that you've got too much up here, caught up in your own head. And while I think it's great, it actually isn't. So some things I take out and I stash away in files on my computer, just in case I want to use them again. A lot of that got slashed and burnt, which meant highlight, delete, which is really very excruciatingly painful. But it's better to do it than just get the pain over with. Yeah. So there was a puppy in Dark Days.
Yeah, that
was
was
a
trashed.
Oh. Yeah. Yes. My editor liked the puppy. It read well, but the puppy didn't help the plot. The puppy actually bogged the plot down, so the puppy went, and other stuff happened. There is okay. For the dog lovers, there is still puppies. Sarah was like, how would you respond to the puppy comment?
I think it's best to make no comment.
So no comment. Now I did see a hand up.
I'm just wondering, what type of book would be doing like after you finish this series, like a steampunk or something?
I've got a science fiction with a plague in space, 3/4 written, except that then we had a plague, so I decided to put that on the back burner. Okay, I have another story which is about singers who enthrall the universe with their voices but are part of a massive cult. And then there's another one which started out as a short story that became a longer story, and it's about like a policewoman in space. And then there's another one which I started relatively recently about a librarian who's part of a secret order, and at night sometimes the books do things, shall we say. So when I get those ideas, I write them down and stick them in a file on my computer so I don't forget what I started, because sometimes you have this really good idea and you might lose it if you don't write some of it. But you can't write it now because you have to write the third book of this one. Yeah. Any other questions?
So you're not running out of ideas then?
No. And my search history does look quite interesting. So yes, at the moment I've done a lot of searching on what kind of armour to put my character in. So I've learned in multiple periods she's going to be wearing because it just works with her. Yeah. But yes, my search history looks dreadful. So if there's ever a really bad crime committed in Muswellbrook, let's hope the police don't look at my search history.
I actually have another question. Obviously, the theme of amethyst is continued throughout the book, having had that prompt from the writer's room about writing something purple. Why did you go with amethyst? What is the significance of the theme of amethyst throughout the thing?
It was, so for those of you who read the first books, you'll note that in the order, the ladies' order, it's divided into different groups, or I've called them sects. And each different group has a different job. So the hunters that Khazari is part of hunt the monsters that are evil and came from beyond somewhere else, and get rid of them. The navigators wander through the forest and they actually detect the bullworms. They have healers, and they each have a different gemstone that they wear around their neck. So hunters wear an amethyst. So I did, as I was saying to Cecil earlier, I looked up the mythical significance of gemstones to see what people associate them with. And so amethysts are associated with protection and with dreams in mythology. Various mythologies, there's lots of mythologies and they all assign lots of different things. But I actually did sort of go, what's the general feel about significance, if you like?
Well, that definitely carries across.
Yes.
These two books.
Yes, yeah. So I think we might read a little
Speaking of
excerpt.
monsters.
Speaking of monsters. Yes.
So this extract from Dark Days, a bit of an action scene.
Bit of an action scene.
An action scene. Here we go. The thing was fast, much faster than the suckers or the monster that had assailed the abbey, and much, much faster than the fire gorgon it subordinate. She ducked and wove around it, staying just ahead of the thing's darting movements, trying to get it to lift its throat. The sheer speed of the thing was incredible. It hissed and sent a jet of poison arcing through the air towards her. She accelerated even more, relying on instinct rather than planning, and avoided the jet, but then almost ran into a second one. The two heads made the thing dangerous, even for a dancer. She ducked under the deadly stream, and it sluiced into a shrub, turning the leaves black and dead, smoke spiralling into the air. As always, when she danced, Khazari felt as if her opponent's movements were predictable, but it still took concentration, and the viper gorgon's two heads moved independently from a branching point below their skulls. Fleetingly, she wondered again which one drove the body, before she dodged once more, trying to figure out how to get the thing to rise up far enough to expose its vulnerable parts. Yet another jet of poison hissed into the vegetation just behind her, and once again she nearly ran into the second. She circled back slightly, giving herself a bit more space, but trying to keep the thing far enough from Javon and Andis. The clearing was a small hollow, set slightly lower than the surrounding area, enhancing the nest-like ambience she'd noted earlier. As well as the venom, the thing spewed hatred into the air. Hatred that scalded and burned the mind, just as its venom burned the vegetation around it. It seethed hatred, and Khazari wondered how one creature could possibly hoard so much hatred as it poured out from the monster in waves, buffeting her. It was like a physical force trying to throw her off balance. She ducked and wove, anticipating the creature's every move and countering it, trying to stay just far enough ahead to keep the Gorgon's attention. Instinct was one thing, but as the abbot had said during one of her lessons, instinct was a guide, but Khazari's brain still needed to be involved. It was the first time she'd really danced with deliberation rather than reaction, and with a conscious goal, other than staying alive, that was, in mind. Twice she left her move almost too late, acrid fumes for the Gorgon's venom stinging her nostrils as she bent away from it, waiting for her chance to drive it into a mistaken move toward the spots where Javon and Andis were concealed. She could only imagine what might happen should she inhale a full breath tainted by the monster. Then the thing struck, and distracted, it nearly had her. And I'm going to leave it, I think, at that point. Excellent. Giving too much away.
I'm going to read another excerpt which is quite different. So Khazari, at the end, with this pledge, left her home and didn't have a great leaving. Her parents didn't really want her to go, but she went anyway. And so this happens just as this is the first time she's met her parents again in quite a long time, and all kinds of things have happened. Her mother's name is Liselt and her dad's name is Franco. Hands on her hips, Liselt jerked her head at Khazari's brothers, who scampered immediately up the stairs at the back of the kitchen. Then she deliberately dried her hands on her apron, removed it, revealing her normal working clothes beneath, then folded her arms on her chest. Khazari regarded her mother nervously, trying to calm her breathing. She couldn't take her eyes off her as her mother's words rolled around and around inside her head. Some of those who pledged to the lady die, Khazari. They die or fall into darkness. She resisted the urge to cover her scar, but felt her lips begin to tremble and press them together firmly. Liselt, began Franklin, but she waved him silent with a hand. Her face, normally lively and full of expression, was unreadable. Khazari had never seen her mother like this. Even the night before the day of choosing, when she defied her parents, her mother had been full of fire, her normal, forthright, plain-speaking parent, the one who never left her in doubt of how she was feeling or what she thought. The person standing before her seemed a stranger, and all of a sudden, Khazari felt as if she was an intruder in her own home. "Lady," she whispered silently, "what's happened? Where is my mother?" And as she prayed the words, she realised what she was feeling. It was as if her mother had gone away somewhere, and this woman standing before her was an imposter of some kind. The silence stretched endlessly, and Khazari could feel the tension like a taut string in the room, a string that connected them all, but was pulled to breaking point between her mother and herself. She found herself doubting her convictions. Had her departure torn her family apart? Clearly, her father had no reservations about her actions, and her brothers seemed just the same as ever. But her mother? Had her relationship with her husband broken? Had she shut herself away from her other children? And was it all Khazari's fault? And there's been more of that. I reckon we've probably talked enough. Yes?
Are you going to do them as audiobooks as well?
That is the plan, yes.
Both scripts?
Yes. We actually looked at doing Frontier Incursion as an audiobook a couple of years back. My publisher had contacted an audiobook maker because it takes a long time to read an audiobook and you require a good voice actor. They provided us with lots of voice samples, but, okay, this sounds awful. I don't want them to sound totally American because my characters are not American, okay? And nearly everything is in the US. And so all the voice, and so we asked for what we thought was a neutral accent. Because you have American accent, we knew that we would never get away with an Australian voice because Australian voices are not listened to because people find them interestingly different. So, but every voice they provided us got twangier. And in the end we just put it on hold. But the aim is to have it as Americans.
Yeah, I asked because reading a series to my grandchildren. It's taken a long time.
There's 130,000 words in every book, which is probably right. Sorry. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So the plan is still to go audiobook at some point. Yeah, we hope very much. I like audiobooks. Like them. So, yes. Any more questions? Well, we'll finish bending your ears. Thank you so much again for coming. It's been really, really nice to see you all night, here tonight, and thank you so much again, Cecily. Thank you. We have all the books here. Mel's over there, happily there, with all the bits. The Avatar stories are priced at $20 each, so Amethyst Pledge and Frontier and Dark Days are $20 each. The Frontier books, if you buy a set, are actually $50 for the set or $20 a book. There are also some double pick vouchers that go with each book. And if you would like a Frontier Defiant type sticker to stick upon you, you can just have a sticker. So you're very welcome. They look basically just like that Frontier Defiant poster over there. But please hang around, chat, and thank you so much again for coming. It's greatly appreciated, and it's been such a nice evening. It's so much better than the lounge room, even if it wasn't. So thank you very much. So please eat, please drink, please chat. And if you would like the book, Mal sells them. I'll sign them if you would like to sign them.